of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Twistero. Chapter 4. Gainful Employment.
Did you mean what you said this morning?
At first, when Dobby had returned that evening with his hands holding a carrier bag of clothes, Shouta had been surprised. He looked into the boy, unobtrusively of course, as he loitered around him more and more. There was no missing persons posters matching his description, and at the age of 15, the police in this district saw people of that age as adults, which was madness, but it meant more teens could be prosecuted, didn't it? Therefore, since no one was looking for him, he probably was the age he stated. This meant that he didn't have to live at home, that he may have left his home and family by choice. He'd met many young people who'd done such things. It made his stomach hurt just thinking about it, for unlike them, he'd had loving parents and a good life before the accident that had led to their deaths. He couldn't imagine what it'd be like to have parents who'd purposefully harm and neglect you. That may have explained the other's scarring, too. God, that had similarly explained his abrasiveness. He'd thought that he'd scared him off with his offer as well. That's why, when the other entered, he'd been too absorbed in supervising the 4 kids who'd come to his study area to realize he'd come in. They were Rebecca Ochako, her father in tears at the discounted food, Asui Tsuyu, her parents similarly pleased that she had a safe place to study, alongside Izuku and Katsuki, the latter insisting that Deku stay away from him.
I'm not in the habit of saying things I don't mean,
he replied as they spoke.
That'd be irrational,
he reminded, his eyes sneaking to some of the other patrons who were simply relaxing with drinks, plates of cookies, cake, and bowls of takoyaki before observing the teen carefully.
Do you need a place to stay, too?
I'm not here to be your twink,
and I have no interest in sleeping with anyone, let alone minors.
He snipped quietly, his brows furrowing.
God, I am so sorry if that's been something you...
People have tried. The youth countered, a flicker of flame ghosting around his hair, his features conflicted.
I have a spare room,
Shouta heard himself offer.
It's yours if you want it.
I can't pay.
I don't want your money, or anything else,
he confided as he approached him, his tone lacquered with concern as they stood between the study area and the cafe proper. The area was full of laughter, of children making friends and offering advice, despite Katsuki's insistence that he didn't need any help from nerds like you! Dobby could have been him. He could have ended up on the streets, bitter, unwanted, unloved. No one should have to feel that way.
Why?
The other breathed, his turquoise eyes narrowing.
Why? Because you look like you need a break, Dobby,
he answered carefully.
And I'm fortunate enough to be in a position to give it to you.
He shrugged.
No tricks, no schemes, but full disclosure, I don't know what a family is or what families are supposed to do, and I'm not offering something so intrusive,
he admitted.
And besides, having a food taster on hand is going to be pretty useful if this place keeps being busy, right?
Snorting, those tired eyes rolling, the teen regarding him carefully. Fine, he said hotly.
I'll take your room and take the job you're offering.
He huffed as though it had been forced on him.
But if I don't like anything, I'm gone. Understood,
he returned.
Why don't you go sit down over there, and then I'll get you something to eat, all right?
As the evening rolled around, Katsuki had been collected by his mother, who'd banged him for a whole devil's food cake, just as he'd made the one she shared at work that day. Her purse waved in his face as she pleaded for the dessert made to order for Friday. He'd agreed and watched bewilderedly as she squealed into her phone. He should have the time. He could put the ingredients aside, and it was relatively easy to do. His cafe ovens were much more reasonable than the ones he'd had previously. Katsuki simply rolled his eyes before almost shyly, his gaze checking to make sure that the other kids weren't eavesdropping. He'd reminded him about the all-night bento. He'd assured him it'd be ready. The soft smile on the kid's face hadn't made him feel satisfied, not at all. Then the Bakugo storm had left in a blaze of angry shouting that had even Dobby cocking an eyebrow. The teen had stayed, eaten, drank, and set up the gaming console for him. He just said, hand it over already, and done it. After which, Shouta returned his attention to the 3 kids who'd be staying until 1900. They were already fast friends. Zuka looked as though all of his Christmases had come at once. It was good to know that the shy kid was receiving positive attention for a change. He was so enamored with the girls and their quirks, his pencil scratching down notes at lightning speed as they sat together in one of the booths, their meals gratefully eaten alongside a few healthy side dishes he'd given them. The girls were preening under his attention and praise. They'd both similarly been ostracized in their own elementary schools. Ochako's family were straddling the poverty line, something the playground bullies found hilarious. He remembered such teasing himself. And Tsuyu, well, there was no disguising the mutation of her quirk. It was great to see. It was good to know that they now had a place to come. Then his gaze casting around the, thank goodness, much quieter cafe, he nodded at Dabi, who was playing through one of the games, the teen nodding back, before he left the service bar and entered the cafe proper, his spray bottle and cleaning cloth in hand. He knew that spending a little more on the thick, scratch-resistant tabletops would be worth it as the coffee stains, crumbs, and sauce splashes vanished with a wipe. Very satisfying. Oi! Blinking, he looked up to find his lodger, employee, standing there, his hand outstretched.
You got better things to do, right?
He huffed.
I can finish this? You sure?
He asked, his brow cocked.
We haven't put an employment contract together yet. Just give them here, not so old guy.
The other grumbled before shiving him away. Grinning despite himself, he'd have to give the kid one of his spare aprons and order a new capler, too. Shouta made his way to the service bar and ran over the stock he had left to sell that day. There was a lot of it. 3 sandwiches, 1 slice of cake, a small lemon drizzle with chantilly cream that he'd been saving for the next day, and a small tub of takoyaki batter. Luckily, he had ready-to-go ingredients in the kitchen if any other people came in or the kids' parents were hungry, but damn, it was good job he'd not started offering self-defense classes yet. He was going to have a relatively busy night and early morning. It was similarly fortuitous that he was closing at 2000. Ding ding! Snapping his attention to the cafe's door. And that little cat bell was well worth the time he'd taken to clean it. Shouta stood a little straighter as a woman who'd been clocked on his CCTV in the dead of night, coming and going around the huge apartment complex that loomed over his little establishment, cautiously approached the counter. Behind her cheap sunglasses, he could see a black eye blooming.
Hello?
He greeted evenly.
What could I get you?
She tried her oversized coat wrapped around her. Despite the May warmth, he'd have to start using the air conditioning soon. Can I just get a glass of water, please?
Of course.
He said before gesturing to the booth directly across from him. He was sure Dabi wouldn't mind someone taking his spot. The teen had wiped everything down, returned the cleaner to his little station, and was now staring bewilderedly at Izuku as the child talked his ear off about his quirk.
Please take a seat.
I wouldn't want to.
Ma'am, you're welcome to sit.
He said softly, his expression similarly softening as she flinched a little but conceded and sank into the comfortable seat with a sigh. She was probably a sex worker with few options. No one should have to be in that position unless they wanted to be, or someone trapped in a loveless marriage or relationship with no outs. Not that he'd make any assumptions, because that would be irrational, but he'd seen people broken by such things before. And this woman, whoever she was and whatever she did, looked like she was on the edge. Filling up 5 glasses and adding one of his homemade syrups, mint and chamomile, something few people were allergic to and many found soothing, he plated up the cake and approached her with a tray, his free hand putting the dessert and a glass in front of her. I can't...
We're closing in 2 hours, ma'am.
He offered.
You've been doing me a favor.
He assured.
Unless you don't like lemon, mint, and chamomile.
Blinking at them owlishly, her coat tightening a little more, she tried to smile at him. I really...
Oi!
Dabi cut in, his grunt causing both of them to look at him, the woman's eyes widening slightly.
He does this kind of crazy shit all the time. He's right. You're better off just eating it, shit sub.
He urged before slipping into the bench across from her. Rubbing hastily at her eyes, the dusty lilac-haired woman sniffed, nodded, and picked up the fork to eat. Sharing a look with the teen, who waved him off, Shouta nodded before placing a glass in front of the scarred youth and walking toward the 6-year-olds, their hands gratefully accepting the drink. Oh, wow! Aizawa-san, this is so yummy! The little brunette smiled. Haven't I already had my drink with the meal? She asked a little worriedly.
That's all the house, kid.
He assured.
Staying hydrated is important when you're young and working hard at school.
He furthered, the girl's smile returning at his words. Thank you, Aizawa-sensei, kiddo. Are you sure? the others were quick to add, Izuku's glass half drank already. His mouth had rarely closed all afternoon, had it? It was nice to see him coming out of his shell, wasn't it? Nodding at their gratitude, the cafe owner put the empty tray under his drink and checked on the two quietly talking salarymen crowded in the back booth. They were both exhausted, grateful, and ordering another 2 coffees. They again held out to him as neither were ready to move. Then he moved back to the service bar to begin making the drinks. He should have known that things were going too well.
There you are, you little bitch!
The door had boomed open, almost detaching the bell, and in a flash of movement, he was there, his 6-foot-tall form standing between the gasping woman and a near 7-foot muscle-bound dickhead whose orange eyes were narrowed angrily, sparks of energy bristling from his shoulders.
Can I help you, sir?
He asked calmly, his hand now the one waving down Dabi, who had stood, blue flames flickering from his body. The kid would get in trouble if he used his probably unregistered quirk. Damn it! The children gasped behind him, the women cowered, and the salarymen were rapidly whispering into their phones.
Sir! Huh!
The gray-skinned man snorted.
Yeah, you can help me by fucking off, pipsqueak!
He snarled.
That horn I got! I'm only going to ask you to leave once, sir.
He stated, his tone bored, his posture loose.
You're only...
The brute laughed, his left hand balled into a fist as he slammed it into the palm of his right.
You're dead, you...
Activating his quirk, his cap and hair tie dislodging in his wake, the other's defenses completely down and his movements too quick for him to follow beside, Shouta slammed a particularly brutal kick into the man's groin. Then, not even a split second later, he couldn't afford to let up on a man of this size, he made to knock the bastard unconscious with a vicious uppercut, the other keeling backwards with a hyped squeal. Watching dispassionately as he fell whilst giving his right hand a little shake, he'd probably have some light bruising, nothing to stop him from working though. The cafe owner looked down at the man, his mouth lolled open, his limbs quivering in a pain he wouldn't be conscious of until he came around and huffed. It looked as though he'd get some weight training in today after all, didn't it? And so, with a sigh, he walked a step towards his service bar, snagged a roll of duct tape he'd left on the concealed work top beneath it. One of his previous employers had stressed to him that such things were vital, and went all about quickly and effectively restraining him. The process was relatively simple and fast. However, he didn't deactivate his quirk until the other was thoroughly incapacitated just to be safe.
Oh, holy shit!
Blinking. Oh yeah, there were other people in the cafe, weren't there? Shouta looked back at a wide-eyed Dabi, a still distressed woman, starry-eyed children, and gawping salarymen, their phones still pressed to their ears.
Are the cops coming?
He asked whilst leaning down to grab his cap and bubble, his hands shoving his hair back up.
Pros? In 5 minutes.
The fish-featured office worker managed the stutter, his eyes the size of saucers.
The cops would have been better. He lamented to himself. Well, I suppose they can drag him out of here.
He shrugged.
I'll get you your coffee.
He added, his eyes looking back and down at the hog-tied bastard grimly whilst moving to do so. Then, the percolator set, he looked back at his patrons, his right brow cocked. They were all staring at him as though he'd grown a second head.
What?
He asked the room at large.
What? He says.
Dabi repeated dubiously as the young woman, who was probably only a few years older than him, pressed napkins into her eyes, whilst the children gave a loud cheer that was similarly echoed by the salarymen.
Holy crow!
Izuku called, his little form bouncing excitedly on the linoleum floor.
Are you a pro or something?
He gushed.
Pro.
He snorted, his head shaking.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, Izuku, but I'm not really into the whole hero thing.
He advised, his eyes slanting to the teenager who swallowed thickly before relaxing a touch. He looked relieved.
You're not?
The boy gasped as though he'd just kicked a puppy or something.
What? Izuku.
He spoke, his body turning to pouring the coffees that had been paid for.
I'm not meaning to burst your bubble here because I know how much you want to follow your dream, and I commend you for it.
He promised, the drinks now resting on a tray that he'd grab on the walk around.
However, thinking about such things logically, as good and great as some heroes are, too many of them aren't in their profession for the right reasons.
He mused.
A profession that praises people with flashy quirks, good looks, big smiles, and pushes everyone else to the wayside.
He shrugged as he approached him, his expression softening when the other looked stricken.
To me, I think such things are a little false.
He tried to explain. Then, in a gesture he hadn't meant to make, he'd apologize to Inko later if he'd overstepped. He affectionately ruffled the child's hair, as he had with the boys he'd helped to raise.
You don't need a quirk, flashy or otherwise, to be a good person. Who makes a difference?
He said, the youth now looking at him in wonder.
Everyone, no matter where they come from, what they look like, or what their family situation is, has the power to improve themselves, build skill sets, and change things for the better. Remember that.
He furthered, nodding, his face spellbound as Zuko blushed a little and touched his hair when he pulled away, the little girl similarly looking at him as though he just said something earth-shattering. It was just common sense, wasn't it? Boys, that was son, you're just... The grateful salaryman with suckers purpering the majority of his skin breeds. I was looking at that notice board over there. You're offering self-defense lessons for kids on Sundays, right?
That's right,
he repeated. No. Would you consider doing a class for adults, too? He asked, his face a little sheepish. This is a rough place, and, well, it'd be nice if I knew some moves, you know? Blinking at him, Shouta cocked his head a little. He had instructed adults before. He'd spent a year predominantly teaching them in Moto-sensei's dojo after graduating high school.
I hadn't thought that older people would be interested, he admitted. However, if that's something you'd want...
Me too! His fish-featured friend nodded animatedly.
All right, he agreed. I'll consider it. We can have a trial run this Sunday,
he stated.
The cafe will be closed, and we'll be using a marquee outside of it.
Ding ding! We're here to... Ugh! Turning towards the door that had been thrown open again, he needed to check the hinges. The cafe owner regarded the two ridiculously dressed men who were stood there, their eyes blinking at the unconscious, expertly restrained body on the floor before looking around.
You're free to take him any time,
he said nonchalantly, his booted feet walking him forward to put the tray back onto the service bar.
Thank you for your hard work,
he added pointedly, hoping that the men would take the hint and do as asked. Oh my gosh! Why is there a girl? Why? It's President Megan Cloud! He gushed, his little hands grabbing for his notebook while Tsuyu and Otako squealed. Kids. Hey there, little listener! The Bond smiled, his garish hair unmoving as he pointed finger guns at the kid whilst the white-haired man waved at them with a grin. Are you the superfan who got us, huh?
No, he wasn't, Shouta stated, and as you can see, the threat has been contained.
He said bluntly.
Could you please get him?
Whoa. The taller of the pair cut in, his sun-kissed hands making abortive gestures. We need some...
That man,
he interrupted with a dispassionate nod at the unconscious bald man.
Entered my place of business, assaulted one of my patrons, and threatened my life.
He continued.
I've made a legal citizen's arrest using my registered quirk.
He added. Yes, but...
But what?
He grunted.
You don't have the powers or the authority to question me or my customers, and for every minute of time you're wasting, he could wake up and cause damage to my establishment, or worse still, anyone in here.
He reminded.
There are children who need to be protected, and I shouldn't need to tell you that,
he stated sharply when the heroes looked as though they were going to open their stupid mouths again. Shoulders deflating, a quickly muttered conversation shared. The pros then grabbed the man, one by the shoulders, the other by the boots, and started to pull him outside. Hooray! You are my fucking hero, Aizawa. Dabby laughed when the door closed behind him. That was poetry! Snorting, his eyes watching as the men continued to bicker outside whilst a cloud swamped the sleeper, Shouta approached the teen with a thanks before looking to the woman. Shinso? His smile returning.
You okay?
Hi, she breathed a little calmer before she ducked her head. He's one of my jaunts, she said quietly, her arms hugging around her middle. When the police come, no wonder she was so nervous. Sex work was illegal, despite the lack of counseling, support, and career path options that were available to people who'd had a bad start in life, and the spiking numbers of human trafficking rings, thugs, and pimps looking to make money out of human misery. God, it made him angry. Crouching down so he was at her eye level, the raven-haired man nodded.
No one needs to know what your profession is,
he offered in a whisper. The kids were too busy staring out the window at the heroes, the salarymen doing the same, their phones flashing photos, to notice.
I'll file the report with the police,
he told her.
He threatened my life. I have it on CCTV.
He furthered with a gesture to the cameras in the ceiling.
As far as I'm concerned, he was just a thug looking to attack me and one of my customers. All right?
Looking at him, her eyes filling with fresh tears, the woman nodded through a wobbly smile. Thank you, Aizawa-san.